I don't really do much with Twitter, but I do follow a few accounts. One of those accounts is Feminist Frequency, and recently I noticed that they sent out a tweet advocating for people to pre-order a new book about Gamergate. Intrigued, I followed the link to Amazon. The book is written by Zoe Quinn, and it appears to be her take on the Gamergate controversy from August of 2014. It is called Crash Override: How Gamergate Nearly Destroyed My Life and How We Can Win the Fight Against Online Hate. It is due out in hardcover on September 5th of this year. Now, because the book hasn't been released, I can't comment as to its actual contents, but I am troubled by the description. It seems to me that, provided on how the gaming community and the larger mainstream press reacts to the publication of Zoe's book, we could see the whole Gamergate controversy flare back up again. Let's take a look at the first two paragraphs of the book's description. It begins, "You've heard the stories about the dark side of the internet. Hackers, #Gamergate, anonymous mobs attacking an unlucky victim, and revenge porn. But they remain just that, stories. Surely these things would never happen to you." Zoe Quinn used to feel the same way. She is a video game developer whose ex-boyfriend published a crazed blog post cobbled together from private information, half-truths, and outright fictions, along with a rallying cry to the online hordes to go after her. They answered in the form of a so-called movement known as #Gamergate. They hacked her accounts, stole nude photos of her, harassed her family, friends, and colleagues, and threatened to rape and murder her. But instead of shrinking into silence as the online mobs wanted her to, she raised her voice and spoke out against this vicious online culture and for making the internet a safer place for everyone. Well, if you've watched my video on Gamergate or followed the controversy at all, you probably already know why this description is so troubling. But let's quickly walk through it anyway. First, I feel badly for Yoni. He is, of course, the ex-boyfriend that Zoe is smearing here. Worse, anyone who has read the blog post reference knows that it is an outright lie that he sent up a rallying cry to the online hordes to go after her. What actually happened is that Aaron had a highly turbulent relationship with Zoe Quinn in which she admitted to cheating on him multiple times with members of both the press and game developers. He was so hurt and wounded when he discovered this that he posted about his experiences in a long and rather heart-wrenching blog post now called the Zoe Post. That post is still out there, and I'll provide a link below. Feel free to read it for yourself. But the relevant part here is that Aaron didn't encourage anyone to attack Zoe. Quite the contrary, in fact. Despite of all the pain that Zoe put him through, he still clearly states on the post, "I do not stand by the current abuse and harassment of Zoe Quinn or friends. Stop doing that. It is not in anyone's best interest." Kathy Young also interviewed Aaron about his motivations in an article for Heat Street. Kathy says, "So why did you write the post? What were you after? A lot of people saw it as just an angry ex-boyfriend wanting to settle scores." Aaron responds, "The full motivation is complicated, but mostly I was worried that people trusted Quinn and that she would use social justice principles to enable herself to ruin the careers of other people if she needed to, or to take advantage of people. There are things you can accuse people of that you can't question in those circles." So much for the "a rallying cry to the online hordes to go after her" part of the description. Second, the blurb makes it appear that the Gamergate movement was created specifically to harass Zoe Quinn. This, too, is not accurate. In fact, it is demonstrably false, as can be easily shown by a quick review of the timeline of when the movement began. Aaron released his Zoe post on August 16th. After that, a small group of YouTube commentators, guys like Mundane Matt, the Internet Aristocrat, and Total Biscuit, started to weigh in. At this point, there is no Gamergate or anything like it. Instead, we're dealing with something that is more properly termed a scandal. Now, although these commentators did indeed question whether Zoe may have been using sex to earn favors with some gaming journalists and developers, it wasn't until they expanded their criticisms to other instances of alleged misconduct within the gaming press that didn't involve Zoe Quinn that things really started to heat up. Journalists like Patricia Hernandez, Robin Arnott, Ben Kuchera, and Danielle Riendeau were all implicated in these expanding allegations. And then the discussion widened and dredged up old reports of collusion and conflict of interest. The commentators revisited stories about people like Lauren Wainwright and Jeff Gertzman. So about 10 days after the Zoe post, there's a whole bunch of rumors about a lot of different journalists and developers swirling about. Meanwhile, the gaming press is starting to feel the pressure, so they start scouring through their own forums trying to shut down the discussion before it gets too out of hand and put a lid on those allegations. By August 26th, the Zoe Quinn scandal has already become old news. And it's important to note, the GamerGate hashtag doesn't even yet exist. It's not until August 27th that actor Adam Baldwin hears about all these crazy allegations going on within gaming, and he somewhat jokingly coins the term Gamergate as a sort of an allusion to other historical scandals like Watergate. And then it's on the following day, August the 28th, that the besieged press outlets published their string of "Gamers Are Dead" articles. And we now know the reason that all those articles popped up on the very same day was because the press had colluded to do so via their private mailing list called Game Journo Pros. Their purpose was to deflect attention away from the growing scandal that implicated them and instead try to redirect attention towards a newly invented gamer identity. In a tactic that has become sadly typical of social justice activists, they tried to quash any criticism of their behaviors by pointing the finger of blame at an entire demographic. They tried to shift the story away from ethics and journalism and instead sought to go with the old standby of simply blaming angry white men. And now suddenly, people who couldn't have cared less about the growing scandal suddenly started to care. Gamers objected to being called out by the press in this way. First of all, they weren't all white men, and secondly, they really hadn't done anything wrong. It was the press that was under increasing scrutiny for their allegations of misconduct, so how come gamers were suddenly being called the bad guys? What in the world is wrong with enjoying games and being a gamer?
Last year was a group of cultural critics from, liberal arts colleges, started writing for magazines for video games, websites and these cultural critics started to attack the gamers and tell them that their games were sexist and that they were contributing to the rape culture. And the gamers were not like the young men at the Ivy League. The gamers fought back. Mm-hmm. This became known as Gamergate. The press has completely misunderstood it and defamed the gamers. They were just defending a hobby that they love.
And that consumer-led revolt against the infusion of identity politics into the gaming press as a way to cover for their own misdeeds is really what coalesced to form the core of hashtag Gamergate. So although Zoe Quinn's escapades may have been a catalyst, her description of the movement as being created with the specific intent to harass her both greatly inflates her importance and grossly misrepresents what really happened. Here's the next part of the book's description. In the years since Gamergate, Quinn has helped thousands of people with her advocacy and online abuse crisis resource, Crash Override Network. From locking down victims' personal accounts to working with tech companies and lawmakers to inform policy, she has first-hand knowledge about every angle of online abuse, what powerful institutions are and aren't doing about it, and how we can protect our digital spaces and selves. Crash Override offers an up-close look inside the controversy, threats, and social and cultural battles that started in the far corners of the internet and have since permeated our online lives. Through her story, as target and as activist, Quinn provides a human look at the ways the internet impacts our lives and culture, along with practical advice for keeping yourself and others safe online. Now, again, the book hasn't yet been released, so I don't have much to go on here, but I thought I'd just point out a few matters of note. The first thing is that I thought it was interesting that the Crash Override Network website turns out to be funded by donations to Feminist Frequency. And any money that is intended for Zoe Quinn's network apparently gets rerouted back through Feminist Frequency's organization first. This seems a bit odd to me, especially in light of recent criticisms that have been raised about Feminist Frequency's tax-exempt status due to their political activism and apparent profit motives. Remember, I found out about the book via Feminist Frequency tweet encouraging people to pre-order it. So it seems a little strange to have a tax-exempt non-profit provide advertising for a profit-making endeavor that, in turn, provides kickbacks to that non-profit parent organization. Again, it may be perfectly legal. I don't know tax law. It's just an interesting relationship. Secondly, I thought it was a rather unfortunate choice of a name to go with Crash Override Network because of the acronym it creates. C-O-N, or CON. Well, enough said about that, I suppose. Thirdly, I note that the book is named after Zoe's anti-harassment network, rather than it being named something else, like My Gamergate Story, or Zoe Hates Vivian James, or anything else that reflects the controversy. Now, I may be ignorant of the scope of the problem, but I can't help but wonder if a network dedicated to preventing online harassment is really necessary for your average person. I think that most of us are subject to some degree of meanness or rude comments on the internet. I know that I've received my fair share. But if I had ever found myself feeling genuinely threatened, I would have gone to the police rather than to an online support group powered by donations. My sense is that the people who feel the need for a network beyond what you can get from your own parents, teachers, or local authorities are probably celebrities who are in the public eye or otherwise some way provoking controversy. So this whole thing seems a bit self-serving to me. Anyway, this all makes me wonder if we can expect some kind of a public or marketing push centered around the Crash Override Network and Zoe's book in the near future. If the gaming press uncritically advances Zoe's version of events and supports her con, and that, in turn, gets picked up by the mainstream press, maybe we'll see all this stuff revisited yet again. Hence, why I wonder if this has the potential to be GamerGate Round 2.
Round 2. Fight!
Well, if that does happen, I have a few suggestions as how best to see things through. Suggestion number 1. Do not personally attack, harass, or threaten anyone. It is critical to recognize that, despite their protestations to the contrary, people like Anita Sarkeesian and Zoe Quinn thrive on the publicity that such harassment gives them. Mean-spirited attacks and threats provide the oxygen that they use to feed the fires of their victim narrative. They can't argue their case on its own merits, and so instead they emphasize how victimized they are. And the mainstream press eats this up, and it's how they garner so much media attention. So, starve them of their oxygen. Let them suffocate on your calm, non-threatening, Zen-like approach to the situation. Suggestion number 2. Know the facts about what really happened with Gamergate, and then report on them directly and simply. You don't have to get angry here. Just let people know that Gamergate was, and continues to be, primarily a consumer-led revolt against the infusion of identity politics into the gaming press. Suggestion number 3. Be prepared to vote with your wallet or your eyeballs again. If we see a round 2 of Gamergate where a bunch of irresponsible press outlets decide to elevate Zoe Quinn's false narrative and thereby set out to misrepresent games or gamers yet again, let them know that you will no longer be patronizing their services and then simply walk away. One of the most important lessons about these social justice activists that you can learn is that they only have as much power over you as you are willing to grant them. If you refuse to be shamed or provoked, they have no power.
Strange game. The only winning move is not to play. How about a nice game of chess.
All right, that's all I have to say about this topic right now, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. So what do you think? Will Zoe Quinn's new book signal the start of GamerGate Round 2? Is this something that those of us who care about games and game development should be preparing for? Share your thoughts with me in the comments below, and as always, game on, my friends!